So my name is Cyndi Marquez. I am a licensed professional counselor, a clinical therapist here at Dayrise Wellness. Today I will be presenting on how to talk so teens will listen, and in return, teens will talk. So some quick objectives or overviews of what we're going to be talking about today is we are trying to understand common communication barriers with teens, learn effective listening skills, explore strategies to reduce conflict, and review validation and empathy, which we will learn are very important when speaking to teens. So to start off, I believe it'd be important to kind of just discuss the adolescent brain. So our brains typically stop growing in size in early adolescence, but they continue to develop and mature until we're about 25, maybe a little bit older, between 25 and 30. The final part of the brain to develop is our prefrontal cortex. So that's the front part of our brain, and this part of our brain is in charge of decision making, impulse control, and reasoning. Something that is important to note is that with individuals with ADHD, the prefrontal cortex will never really fully develop, or it is significantly smaller in size than the neurotypical brain, which is why these individuals may struggle even more so with decision making, impulse control, and reasoning. So important to keep in mind as well for our adolescents that may be diagnosed with ADHD or more maybe neurodivergent. And so in brains, the limbic system, and this is the part that governs our emotions, develops earlier. So the limbic system actually is composed of the hippocampus and the amygdala. And the hippocampus is our part of the brain where I remember my psychology teacher from high school telling us that think of an elephant never forgets. The hippocampus is in charge of our memory. So that's the memory center. And then the amygdala, they are the typical center for emotional responses. So, things like pleasure, fear, anxiety, and anger tend to, be processed in the amygdala. And this part of the brain is the part that actually develops earlier in our brains before the decision-making part of our brain, which is why teens tend to process emotions first and logic second, because that part of their brain is not yet fully developed yet. So a lot of their decisions and processing is more emotional rather than logical. So that imbalance can explain why teens might act more impulsively, they might take greater risks, or they just overall tend to feel emotions a lot more intensely than an adult may. We actually have, I like to think of the adolescent brain a lot of parenting a toddler, in that they think very emotionally, and that is the part of their brain that's really governing their decision making. So they may be pushing boundaries, and they're just really trying to develop their own identity and kind of see the limits in things. So when we parent our adolescents, we want to think back to kind of the way that we parented our toddlers, and remember they are thinking emotionally first, they are developing and pushing limits, and they're trying to really find their identity at this age. So there is a developmental psychologist by the name of Erik Erikson that developed this 8-stage psychosocial theory. And basically in that he broke down the lifespan into 8 different parts, and at each stage everyone has a different dilemma or psychological conflict, right? And teens or adolescents ages 12 to 18 are in the 5th stage, which is identity versus role confusion. So the key task here is developing a sense of self. The big question here is, who am I? Right? So that means that teens may question rules and authority. They may experiment with identity. That means they're trying to figure out what are my goals, right? What do I value the most in life? We see them experiment with their style. So they may, that's where they may want to change their hair color, or one day they're dressed in all black and the next day, they are in, they have a, glittery backpack. Like, this is where they're experimenting the most. And friendships as well. Friendships tend to fluctuate a lot in adolescence. One day Lucy might be their best friend and the next day Lucy is their worst enemy. And that's just them kind of trying to figure out, like, what are my goals and values? How do these people align with that? Who doesn't align with that? What is the new cool thing and all of that? And these individuals are also seeking independence and autonomy. So autonomy, by definition, is the capacity of an individual to make individual decisions, act freely, and govern themselves without external control, which is what's going to be very big, because that's what teens dislike, right? They don't want to feel controlled. They want to feel like they can be themselves without judgment and without restrictions. So how does this impact communication? Teens have an increased sensitivity to peer perception and social evaluation. They react quickly and intensely to perceived criticism. So one thing to note with teens is that they feel first and they think second, and they are very big in observers for nonverbal cues, right? So they are constantly scanning, constantly watching, especially if you're going to have one of those tough conversations with them or just kind of are having a one-on-one. They are going to be hyper-focused on the way that you're presenting. They're reading you. They're constantly trying to pick up and see, are you a safe person? And I think it's important to note that this is based off their perception. It may not be a reality, may not be what you're intending to portray, but this is all of, again, going back to the toddlers, a little bit egocentric, where they are focused on like how they can only see from their perspective. So again, they're very emotional. They're going to react quickly and intensely to perceived criticism. Teens may struggle with perspective taking because thoughts are ruled by emotion. So they may think emotionally and they may not be able to, think logically to whatever, like, to see the perspective that the other person is coming from. They may also think back to past experiences and kind of like make assumptions based off like, oh, well, last time, she did this, so that means going into this conversation, she's going to do this. Like, they are only thinking back to previous, again, like their memory, their hippocampus, and to the emotional ties to it. And they may be more likely to misinterpret tone or intent. So going back again, because they think emotionally, they may be more just kind of like observant and like hypersensitive to any changes in tone or just kind of their perception of like what your intent is for the conversation. So barriers to communication. Teens seek independence and autonomy. There is a greater need for autonomy, which can lead to resistance when feeling controlled. So again, they don't want limitations. They don't want to feel like you're just basically telling them what to do. So teens are wired to separate from caregivers and form their own identity. So when they're saying like no, it's them. It's the part of the process. It's not just necessarily their defiance. They're trying to communicate something. There is an increased emotional sensitivity. Again, they're ruled by the emotional part of their brain. There's a perception of being judged and or misunderstood. So they kind of have this fear of like being judged. They really just want to fit in. Again, they're developing that sense of identity. Where do I belong? Who am I? Who can I trust? Who can I be around? And so there's this constant, like, because they're constantly scanning, they're afraid of being judged or misunderstood, and they're picking up on all of those cues that you're giving them. And another big barrier is a power struggle between teen and parent. So although, the parent intentions may be good and their goals are typically, for compliance or safety reasons, as well as to like teach responsibility, the teen may not necessarily receive it that way. So teens' goal in communication may be, again, autonomy and independence, as well as being heard. So to them, that's the priority, right? Is that their feelings are heard and that they are still valued as their own person. And if we think about it, right, they have gone their whole life being a part of you, as a child. Like, you tell them what to do, you tell them what to eat, you tell them what to wear. And then as they transition into that adolescence age, there is more of that, oh, I really want to wear this to school today. Or, sometimes they don't even tell you what they're wearing. They just have their outfit picked up, and that's, developmentally appropriate. So they are just kind of trying to really just be their own person. And I want to reiterate again that teens are very aware of like nonverbal communication. They're just scanning and they're picking up on how you're presenting. So with that, this is what defiance may look like in your teen. So they may, eye roll. There may be some sarcasm or like dismissive tones in their responses. They may say, I don't care, whatever, shut down. They may be more argumentative or talk back, refuse to engage with you, go in their room, slam the door, whatever. They may ignore requests or delay compliance. So you ask them to wash the dishes and they will wash the dishes, but they're going to wait to wash it until they're good and ready. And there is this increased irritability or emotional outbursts that may also be tied to what may look like defiance. So what may actually be going on? They may feel, misunderstood, overwhelmed, or controlled. So again, they're thinking emotionally, right? They are lacking the perspective-taking skills. So all they're really seeing is this person does not understand what I'm feeling. All they're doing is lecturing. All they're doing is yelling at me. I never get heard. So they aren't able to see like where the other person is coming from at all. They just feel like it's an attack on them. But because they feel this way, or maybe, defiant, what they might actually need is autonomy, validation, and emotional regulation support. So they want to remember that you do value them as their own person, that you hear what they are feeling and you're supporting them through their feelings, as well as, helping them regulate if they are coming to you with an experience that may have, affected them emotionally and are just looking for someone to hear them out. So these are common, unintentionally unhelpful responses. So again, parents may have good intentions with their responses to their teens, but it may not always be exactly what the teen is like looking for. And these things can unintentionally minimize your teen's experience, and it shifts the focus from their emotional needs. So some of these are lecturing, dismissing feelings, saying things like, it's not a big deal, you'll be okay, jumping to immediate problem solving, right? Like, maybe we should just do this, or I can email so-and-so and we can fix this. Criticism or blame, I told you that you should have studied last night, things like that, as well as projection and redirecting to your own experience. So, those back in my day conversations where, trying to connect to, I had it a lot worse, things like that. Teens don't really like to hear that to them, right? Again, it feels like you're dismissing the way that they feel. This may increase feelings of being unheard or invalidated and can create emotional distance rather than create connection. So what we want to do instead is we want to shift the approach. So instead of reacting and, you trying to problem solve, trying to lecture them, maybe, unintentionally criticizing them, we want to listen and understand, or listen to understand, not to respond. We want to hear what they have to say without, thinking about, okay, how do I respond? We're just there to sit with them in their feelings. We want to validate their emotions, and we want to build connection instead of correction. We're going to hear this a lot because the biggest thing here is having that connection with your teen instead of correcting their behaviors. Instead of correcting whatever behavior we think is wrong. So a core skill that you can actually take home and implement today is active listening. So this is actually like at the foundation of counselor school, therapist school. The way that this works is that we want to maintain eye contact with the teen. So although, I know teens, they may not really make direct eye contact and may not really care to look you in the eye, it's important that you at least try to maintain eye contact to let them know that, you're there with them, that you're present, and that you're supporting them. We want to use open body language. So we don't want to, cross our arms and legs. We want to sit relaxed. The more relaxed, the better, so that, they can feel less of that pressure. We want to reflect what we hear. So using statements like, it sounds like. And with that, we also want to allow space for correction or clarification from teens. So, for example, what I'm hearing is blank. Is that correct? Because maybe what you hear isn't what they meant, and they might need to like rephrase it or re-explain it. And we want to avoid interrupting. So we don't want to, bombard them with questions. I think biggest thing that we can tell parents is, you're not a detective. We're not detectives. We're not here to figure out who, what, when, where, why, right? We're here to listen to whatever they need to process or tell us in that moment. And it's important to let the teen share at at their own pace, not at, what pace we would like them to be at. And an example is the teen would say, I hate school. It's so pointless. Parent might respond, it sounds like you're feeling frustrated with school. And that'd be a good place, to say, is that correct? And then the teen can either say, yeah, I am, or, expand on that, or they may say, no, I'm not frustrated with school. It's actually this, whatever. The next thing is going to be validating feelings. So we want to acknowledge feelings without judgment, and we want to avoid minimizing experiences. This goes back to the projection statement, right? We don't want to, back in my day, blah, 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 because that's going to minimize their experience, and that means that to them that could be perceived as judgment, like, oh, my mom thinks that I don't have it as hard, and she thinks I'm worthless, and they begin to internalize and spiral all these things, right? And so we just want to validate. And so some examples of this is going to be, you have a lot on your plate. That sounds really stressful. Or I can see why you feel that way. And this would be following the previous slide, which was the active listening and like opening and asking those questions. So we want to use open-ended questions in our communication with them, because these encourage deeper conversation and they reveal deeper thoughts, motivations, and feelings. We want to really avoid yes or no questions, because we want them to be able to expand. And in that same breath, I want to emphasize that we want to listen to their answers, right? We don't want to listen to respond. We're listening to understand. Again, pick up the same way that they pick up on like nonverbal cues. We want to also look at their nonverbal cues, right? How are they sitting? Like what are their facial expressions looking like? Are they closed off? Do they, are they crying? As well as like indirect communication, right? Teens can kind of like beat around the bush. So they're not the best at speaking directly, and stating how they feel. They may, word it differently. And so it's kind of up to us to also ask if you're understanding it correctly. Try to, decipher what they're trying to say and clarify with them. A good tip would be to model that as well, right? You can model, doesn't have to be in this exact discussion, but like in other discussions that you guys have, you can model what that's like to discuss your feelings and be direct in your communication with them. Some examples of open-ended questions are, what was the hardest part of your day, and what part of that stuck with you? The biggest thing is going to be picking your battles. So we're avoiding power struggles, and this sounds very, straightforward, right? Like choose your battles, but we want to make sure that our teen doesn't feel like we're just, picking and choosing and constantly like nagging at them. We want to focus at what's at hand. What is it that the teen needs? And what's it called? So if we think about like, thinking of an example, let's say that your child comes to you and says like, I'm really struggling with school and I'm having a hard time focusing in math class, and today Lucy had a energy drink, and Lucy's maybe their best friend, and your focus shifts to, why is your best friend drinking energy drinks? I hope you're not drinking energy drinks, right? But that's not the focus of that conversation. So that's going to completely invalidate what they just said in regards to, I'm really struggling with school, I'm having a hard time focusing, right? So that's going to put a barrier right there. They're not going to want to open up anymore because you're no longer listening to what they had to say and what the presenting problem is there in that moment. I'm not saying that we shouldn't revisit the, safety around energy drinks, but in that moment in time, that may not be the right time. We can always come back to it. We want to pick our battles in the moment. With that, we want to also offer choices when possible. So if there is, like, for example, if there is a consequence here, if you can, it would be beneficial to offer them options in their consequences. Let them choose if they can, if it's possible. And we want to stay calm and regulated. We don't want to also act on emotion, because if they're acting on emotion, we're acting on emotion, then we're really not going to go anywhere. We're not communicating. No one's listening. So we want to try to stay as calm and regulated as we can. Yes. So, what we want to do is we want to make problem solving collaborative. So we want to ask for permission before we give advice, right? We want to ask the teen what role they need you to play, and we want to collaborate on the solution. So we do not have to be Superman, right? We do not have to be a detective, and we do not have to be Superman. We don't have to save the day. Sometimes all your teen wants is you to be there and have that connection with them, right? They just want you to listen, because at the end of the day, you're still their caregiver, you're still their parent, there's still love there for you, and they need to feel that reciprocated back, right? They just want someone to hear them out sometimes. Sometimes it's not, if they're having trouble at school, it's not, hey, do you want me to email your math teacher? Do you need me to sign you up for tutoring? Do you want me to do this, right? We can directly ask them. So for example, do you want help figuring this out, or do you just need me to listen? Because maybe they don't need the problem solving then. And then after, they sit there and they process and they identify what they need from you, and you guys, work through those emotions, then maybe, we can go through, well, what are some actions that you've done to kind of help with this, right? Depending on, where they're at. Maybe they just need that emotional processing. One of the biggest, if not the biggest suggestion I have is to build connection daily, right? Connection is everything. We want to spend quality time together, whether this is like running errands, maybe like you want to go and get manicures together, do a sport together, start a new hobby together, watch a movie together. We want to be intentional in our quality time together. We want to show interest in their world. So their interests, if because they're in the car together, hey, why don't you connect to the radio and to the aux and play your music, and then they can, play a song and, wow, I really like this band, that this is a cool song, or hey, when did you start listening to them, or whatever, right? They're friends. Hey, how is, Lucy doing? I heard that she was upset last week. I remember you saying she was upset last week. How's she doing? Do you want to maybe, hang out with Lucy this weekend? I'm happy to drive you girls to the movies, whatever, right? We want to use small moments to connect. So again, this also connects to like their interests or things like that, or also small moments like going for a walk with the dog. Be intentional with it. The biggest thing is to be intentional, right? Because the teen, again, scanning, they are going to read for insincerity. So we want to make sure that we are intentional, because teens will know through faking it, and we want to be intentional and, as sincere as we can be with them. So some quick tips: we want to just listen and validate. We want to be calm and reassuring. Again, we want to model, right? Modeling is the best thing you can do because they are watching you since childhood, and we want to be able to model that calm behavior and like kind of co-regulate. We want to celebrate small steps, so praise efforts to be honest and transparent. We want to thank them for their transparency and offer compliments. After you guys have a heart-to-heart, I really enjoyed having open conversation with you. I really enjoyed our time together. We should do this again, or, let them know that you're there with them and that you generally enjoy having that connection with them. And we want to utilize side-by-side or parallel communication. So basically an example of this would be like driving in the car, right? Because you're sitting side by side, or going for a walk because you tend to walk side by side, engaging in an activity such as like art, cooking, crocheting, or like going grocery shopping, things like that. So you can communicate in settings like that where it's going to put less pressure on the teen because they're not going to feel like they're being interrogated. Instead, when you're talking side by side, there's like almost like a softer approach to that. So if we have like really tough conversations to have with our teen, or like maybe you notice that they're a little off and you want to see if they will open up, that would be a good time to try and go for something like this, open up the floor through parallel communication. Because again, like the shared focus on the activity takes away from the pressure of sitting down and having that like formal one-on-one. Although eye contact is important, sometimes eye contact can be a little much and scary and feel like an interrogation for teens. So we want to do that. Not only that, I think it's important because it'll help regulate emotions. If the teen feels more at ease in the conversation, it will encourage more of that perspective taking, because again, they do struggle with that because they're thinking emotionally. But if they're emotionally regulated, then they can use more of that brain power, right, to take those perspectives of the other person and see where they're coming from, as well as improve and reflect on the situation. So overall, what teens need the most is to feel heard, to feel respected, to feel understood, and to feel supported, not controlled. Biggest takeaway: connection comes before correction. Validation builds trust, and listening is more powerful than lecturing. So again, we want to make sure that we are supporting our teens emotionally, validating their feelings, because that is the biggest way that you are going to connect with them and have them feel heard and respected. And in turn, that's going to also like build that mutual respect for you and openness for you. Is all. So yeah, if anybody has any questions, you guys can reach out to us. My email, I believe, is on the Dayrise Wellness website. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions anybody may have. Otherwise, I hope everybody has a great day. And thank you.